The lights of Las Vegas were burning brighter than ever that night. Inside the city, casinos were alive with music, laughter, cigarette smoke, and the constant ringing of slot machines. But only a few miles away, another kind of electricity was building. Two men were preparing for two very different kinds of battles. One was preparing to step onto a stage. The other was preparing to step into a boxing ring. One was known as the king. The other called himself the greatest. And neither man knew that, before the night was over, they would have a conversation that would stay with them for years. It was Valentine's Day, 1973. Elvis Presley was performing in Las Vegas, where he had become one of the biggest attractions in the world. That same evening, Muhammad Ali was scheduled to fight Joe Bugner at the Las Vegas Convention Center. Ali was confident. He always was. He walked through the world as if doubt was something that happened to other people. But that afternoon, something unusual was waiting for him. A gift. A gift from Elvis Presley. And when Elvis finally walked into Ali's room, neither man knew exactly what to expect. Because fame had made both of them larger than life. But behind those famous names were two very different men. And that afternoon, for a few hours, the world would disappear. Elvis had been thinking about the gift for days. He didn't want to give Ali something ordinary. A bottle of champagne. No. A watch. Too simple. A photograph. Not enough. Elvis wanted something that would make Muhammad Ali laugh. Something extravagant. Something that looked like it belonged to the world of Elvis Presley. So a robe was prepared. It wasn't an ordinary boxing robe. It was flashy, decorated, and covered with jewels and rhinestones. On the back were words intended to honor Ali. People's choice. The robe cost a considerable amount of money and looked exactly like something Elvis would wear. There was only one problem. The wording wasn't quite right. Ali was famously known as the People's Champion. But by the time anyone realized the mistake, the robe had already been made. Elvis was reportedly unhappy about it. He wanted everything perfect, especially when he was giving something to someone he admired. And that tells you something about Elvis. The public saw the glitter, the jumpsuits, the jewelry, the cars, the enormous stage. But Elvis could be surprisingly thoughtful when he cared about someone. And Muhammad Ali. Ali didn't need another famous person telling him how great he was. He had heard that his entire life. But he respected people who treated him like a human being rather than a celebrity. That was about to become important. Very important. Because when Elvis entered Ali's room that day, there were no cameras positioned for a television interview. No press conference. No stage. No audience. Just two famous men looking at each other. And for a moment, neither one knew what to say. Elvis walked in wearing his unmistakable style. Ali looked at him. Then looked at the robe. Then looked back at Elvis. A smile slowly appeared on Ali's face. The tension disappeared. Ali began laughing. Elvis laughed too. And suddenly, the meeting wasn't formal anymore. It was two entertainers enjoying the absurdity of the situation. Ali held up the robe. He looked at the decorations. Then he looked at Elvis. You really made this for me. Elvis smiled. Sure did. Ali shook his head. This ain't a boxing robe. Elvis laughed. That's the point. Ali put it against himself. Man, I'm gonna look like you. Elvis raised an eyebrow. You couldn't handle that. Ali laughed even harder. For a few minutes, they joked. Ali imitated Elvis. Elvis joked about Ali's famous confidence. The room filled with laughter. But then Ali noticed something. Elvis wasn't laughing quite as loudly anymore. There was something behind his smile. Something tired. Something distant. Ali had spent his entire life learning how to read people. He could read an opponent's shoulders, a trainer's eyes, a crowd's mood. And now he was looking at Elvis. Not the king of rock and roll. Not the man millions screamed for. Just Elvis. A man standing in a room surrounded by success, but somehow looking alone. Ali didn't say anything at first. He simply watched him. Then he asked, "Elvis, you all right?" Elvis looked surprised. "Yeah." Ali smiled. "You sure?" Elvis nodded. "I'm fine." But Ali didn't move. He kept looking at him. And Elvis knew immediately that Ali wasn't buying it. Quick question for you. Before we continue, tell me something in the comments. If you could sit in that room for 5 minutes and listen to Elvis and Muhammad Ali talk, what would you ask them? Would you ask Elvis about music? Would you ask Ali about boxing? Or would you ask them what it was really like to live with that much fame? And don't forget to like this story, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. I want to know how many different places around the world are listening to this story tonight. Now let's go back to that room in Las Vegas. Because Ali was about to say something Elvis wasn't expecting. Elvis walked toward a chair and sat down. Ali remained standing. For a moment, neither man spoke. Outside the room, Las Vegas continued moving. People were gambling. Cars were passing. Fans were waiting. Somewhere in the city, thousands of people were preparing to watch Muhammad Ali fight. And somewhere else, thousands more were waiting to see Elvis perform. The entire city was built around entertainment. But inside that room, there was silence. Ali finally broke it. "You know what's funny?" Elvis looked up. "What?" "They call me the greatest." Elvis smiled. "They do. And they call you the king." Elvis laughed softly. "That's what they say." Ali nodded. "That's a lot to carry." Elvis didn't answer. Ali continued. "People think those names make you stronger." He paused. "Sometimes they make you tired." Elvis looked directly at him. That sentence landed differently. Because Elvis understood. For years, people had been telling him what he was supposed to be. The king. The legend. The icon. The man who could walk onto a stage and make thousands of people scream. But nobody ever asked what happened after the applause. Nobody asked what happened when the lights went off. Nobody asked what happened when Elvis was alone. Ali had noticed it. And that was when the mood changed. The jokes were gone. The laughter disappeared. Ali leaned against the table. "You know what I learned?" Elvis looked at him. "What?" "You can beat a man in the ring." Ali smiled faintly. "You can beat 10 men." He paused. "But that's not always the hardest fight." Elvis said nothing. Ali looked straight into his eyes. "The hardest fight is when everybody around you starts believing the legend." Elvis's expression changed. For the first time that afternoon, he wasn't looking at Muhammad Ali, the celebrity. He was listening to Muhammad Ali, the man. Ali picked up the robe again. He looked at the glittering letters. Then he looked at Elvis. "Everybody thinks I don't get scared." Elvis smiled. "You don't." Ali laughed. Of course I do. That answer surprised Elvis. Ali continued. Being brave doesn't mean you don't feel fear. He folded the robe over his arm. It means you walk into the ring anyway. Elvis nodded slowly. Ali pointed toward him. And you do the same thing. Elvis looked confused. What do you mean? You walk onto that stage every night. Ali's voice became quieter. Thousands of people are waiting for you to be Elvis Presley. He paused. But sometimes, Ali looked directly into his eyes. You probably just want to be Elvis. The room became silent. Elvis looked down. For several seconds, he didn't say anything. Then he smiled. But this time, it wasn't the smile of a superstar. It was the smile of a man who had just heard someone say something nobody else had been willing to say. Outside, a knock came at the door. Someone reminded Ali that it was getting close to fight time. Ali looked at the clock, then at Elvis. He picked up the robe. This is beautiful. Elvis smiled. You better wear it. Ali laughed. Oh, I'm wearing it. Elvis shook his head. You're serious? Ali looked at him. I'm walking into that ring looking like the king. Elvis laughed. Then you'd better win. Ali's smile disappeared for just a second. Then he said, I will. He moved toward the door. But before leaving, Ali stopped. He turned around. Elvis was still standing there. Ali looked at him carefully. Then he said something that would stay in Elvis's mind. Don't let them take the man away from the king. Elvis didn't answer. Ali opened the door, then disappeared into the hallway. Elvis remained alone. The room suddenly felt much quieter than before. He looked at the empty doorway, then at the robe, then toward the city outside the window. And for the first time that day, Elvis wasn't thinking about the audience. He was thinking about himself. Several hours later, the Las Vegas Convention Center was packed. The crowd was waiting. The lights came down. The noise rose. And then Muhammad Ali appeared. But this time, something was different. He wasn't wearing his usual robe. He was wearing Elvis Presley's gift. The jewel-covered robe caught the lights as Ali walked toward the ring. People noticed immediately. The crowd reacted. Cameras followed him. And somewhere across Las Vegas, Elvis was preparing for his own show. He didn't know exactly what was happening inside the arena. But he knew Ali had promised him one thing. I'm wearing it. And Ali kept his word. The bell rang. Joe Bugner was ready. Ali was ready. The joking was over. The smiling was over. Now came the fight. Ali moved around the ring with the confidence that had made him famous. But Bugner wasn't there to play a supporting role. He came to fight. The first round was intense. Ali opened a cut over Bugner's left eye, but Bugner continued. Round after round, the two men battled. Ali had predicted an early knockout. It didn't happen. Bugner refused to disappear. He kept coming. And Ali kept answering. 12 rounds. No knockout. No easy victory. Just two men refusing to give in. And when the final bell rang, the judges gave Muhammad Ali the unanimous decision. He had won. But something else had happened that night. The robe had become more than a piece of clothing. It had become a symbol. The king had given something to the greatest, and the greatest had carried it into battle. But perhaps the most important thing Elvis had given Ali wasn't the robe. And perhaps the most important thing Ali had given Elvis wasn't a compliment. It was a reminder that behind every legend, there is still a human being. And Elvis was about to discover just how deeply those words would stay with him. Because the night was not over yet. The applause was still echoing through the Las Vegas Convention Center. Muhammad Ali had done it. 12 rounds. 12 rounds of movement, pressure, punishment, and determination. And when the final bell rang, the judges had given him the victory. But as Ali stood in the ring, breathing heavily beneath the bright lights, there was something else catching everyone's attention. The robe. The white, extravagant robe covered in glitter and jewels. The robe Elvis Presley had given him. Ali looked down at it. Then he smiled. For just a moment, the noise of the arena seemed to disappear. He remembered the conversation earlier that day. He remembered Elvis sitting quietly in that room. He remembered telling him, "Don't let them take the man away from the king." Ali had no idea how deeply those words had affected Elvis. And Elvis had no idea how seriously Ali was taking his promise. But now Ali had another promise to keep. He had to find Elvis. After the fight, reporters surrounded Ali. Microphones appeared from every direction. Questions came flying. How does it feel? Were you surprised by Bugner's performance? Did you expect the fight to go 12 rounds? What's next for Muhammad Ali? Ali answered some questions with his usual confidence. He joked. He smiled. He talked about the fight. But eventually, one reporter noticed the robe. "What are you wearing?" Ali looked down. He grinned. "This." He spread his arms. "This is from Elvis." The reporters laughed and immediately became interested. "Did Elvis really give you that?" Ali nodded. "Yeah." "Why?" Ali smiled. "Because the king wanted the greatest to look good." The room erupted in laughter. Ali loved it. But then his expression changed. He looked down at the robe again and quietly said, "He's a good man." The reporters didn't know what to make of that answer. They expected another joke, another famous Ali line. Instead, Ali simply walked away. Because there were some things he didn't want to explain to the press. Some things belonged to the people who had been in the room. Across Las Vegas, Elvis was preparing for his own performance. The dressing room was busy. People were moving around. Clothes were being prepared. Musicians were checking equipment. Assistants were coming in and out. Everyone knew what Elvis needed. Everyone knew what Elvis expected. But Elvis himself seemed unusually quiet. He kept thinking about Ali. Not the boxer. Not the champion. Not the man who could make an entire arena explode with a single sentence. He was thinking about the man who had looked at him and asked, "You all right?" It was a simple question. But Elvis couldn't forget it. People asked Elvis how he was all the time. Fans asked. Reporters asked. Friends asked. Employees asked. But most of them didn't really wait for the answer. Ali had. That was different. And Elvis knew it. Someone entered the dressing room. "Mr. Presley, they're almost ready for you." Elvis nodded. "Okay." The man started to leave. Then Elvis stopped him. "Hey." "Yes." "Did you hear how Ali did?" The man smiled. "He won." Elvis looked down. "Yeah." He looked pretty good too. Elvis smiled. I knew he would. The man noticed something unusual. Elvis looked proud. Not because Ali had won a fight, but because the robe had been worn. Because Ali had kept his promise. The stage lights came on. The orchestra began. The audience screamed. Then Elvis walked onto the stage. Thousands of people rose to their feet. For them, the king had arrived. The famous white jumpsuit. The jewelry. The hair. The confident walk. The smile. Everything they had come to see. Elvis stood beneath the lights. He looked across the audience. For a few seconds, he said nothing. Then he smiled. Good evening. The crowd erupted. And Elvis began the show. His voice filled the room. The band followed. The audience sang along. Everything looked perfect. But inside Elvis's mind, something had shifted. Ali's words were still there. Don't let them take the man away from the king. And Elvis began wondering whether he had already allowed that to happen. Quick question for you. If you were standing in that Las Vegas audience that night, what would you rather see? A. Muhammad Ali wearing Elvis's robe before his fight. B. Elvis performing live on stage. C. Both moments. Write A, B, or C in the comments. And if you're enjoying this story, hit like, subscribe, and tell us what city or country you're watching from. Because the next moment changes the entire meaning of Elvis and Ali's meeting. The show continued. Song after song. Elvis smiled. He moved across the stage. He joked with the audience. He played the role everyone expected. But something was different. He seemed to be watching himself from the outside. Every time the audience screamed, he remembered Ali's words. Every time someone shouted Elvis, he wondered, do they love me, or do they love the man they believe I am? That question followed him through the entire performance. Then came a quieter moment. The band lowered the volume. Elvis stood almost completely still. The crowd became silent. He looked across the room. Thousands of faces were staring back at him. Some were crying. Some were smiling. Some were holding cameras. Some were simply trying to get close enough to see him. Elvis looked at them. And for one strange second, he imagined Ali standing somewhere in the crowd. He imagined him saying, "The hardest fight isn't against the man in front of you." Elvis took a breath. Then he sang. And his voice sounded different. Not weaker. Not sadder. Just more personal. The audience didn't know why. They simply knew they were witnessing something special. After the performance, Elvis returned backstage. The room was full again. People congratulated him. Someone told him the show had been incredible. Another person said the audience had gone crazy. Elvis smiled. Thank you. But he wasn't celebrating. He was waiting. Waiting for one person. Muhammad Ali. Eventually, someone told him, Ali is here. Elvis looked up. Where's? He's backstage. Elvis stood immediately. And for the first time all night, he looked genuinely excited. Ali entered, wearing ordinary clothes now. The famous robe was gone. He looked tired after the fight. But he was smiling. Elvis walked toward him. Neither man spoke for a second. Then Elvis looked at him. You won. Ali smiled. I told you I would. Elvis laughed. I know. Ali looked at Elvis. You were good tonight. Elvis raised an eyebrow. You saw the show. Ali nodded. I did. Elvis smiled. And Ali pretended to think. Too many sequins. Elvis burst out laughing. There he is. Ali smiled. The tension disappeared. The two men shook hands. Then Elvis pulled Ali into a hug. It wasn't a staged photograph. There wasn't a camera positioned perfectly. There was no audience. Just two men who had spent the same night carrying enormous expectations. One had carried them into a boxing ring. The other had carried them onto a stage. And now they were standing together backstage. Elvis looked at Ali. You know something. What? You were right. Ali's smile disappeared. About what? What you said earlier. Ali waited. Elvis lowered his voice. About people seeing the king and not the man. Ali nodded slowly. He didn't joke this time. Yeah. Elvis looked away. I don't know if I remember how to separate them anymore. Ali remained silent. That sentence told him more than Elvis probably realized. Ali had spent years fighting against people who wanted to control his identity. Promoters, critics, politicians, the boxing establishment, the media. Everybody wanted Muhammad Ali to be something. But Ali had fought hard to remain himself. He looked at Elvis, then said, "Then start small." Elvis looked back. How? Find something nobody gets to see. Elvis frowned. Ali continued, "Something that's just yours." Like what? Ali smiled. That's your fight. Elvis laughed softly. You always answer questions with another question. Ali grinned. That's why I'm the greatest. Elvis shook his head. Unbelievable. They sat down. For the next few minutes, they talked about ordinary things. Music, boxing, family, travel, fame, the strange life they were living. Ali asked Elvis what it was like to perform in front of thousands of people. Elvis asked Ali what it felt like to walk into a ring, knowing millions of people were watching. Ali answered, "You hear them before you see them." Elvis nodded. Same thing on stage. Ali looked at him. Except your people don't try to punch you. Elvis laughed. No, that's easier. Not always. Ali smiled. He understood. Then Elvis asked, "Do you ever get tired of being Muhammad Ali?" Ali looked at him. The question caught him off guard. For several seconds, he didn't answer. Then he said, "Sometimes." Elvis nodded. "I understand." Ali continued, "But I don't get tired of being me." Elvis looked at him. That sounds simple. It ain't. Ali leaned forward. That's the whole trick. Another question for you. Here's the question I want you to answer. Do you think fame makes a person stronger, or does it make it harder for them to be themselves? Write your opinion in the comments. And tell us where you're watching from, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else in the world. If you're enjoying these emotional stories about legendary figures, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because what Ali said next was something Elvis would remember long after that night in Las Vegas. Ali stood up. He looked toward the door. It was getting late. But before he left, Elvis stopped him. Ali. Ali turned. Yes. Elvis hesitated. Then he asked, "Why did you really give me that advice?" Ali smiled. I didn't. Elvis frowned. You didn't. Ali shook his head. I gave you a question. What question? Ali walked back toward him. The question is. He paused. Who are you when nobody is watching? Elvis stared at him. Neither man spoke. Ali continued. That's the answer you need. Elvis nodded slowly. Ali extended his hand. Elvis took it. And as they shook hands, neither man knew exactly how important that conversation would become. But the night still had one more surprise. Because before Ali walked away, he turned around one final time. He looked at Elvis. And with a smile, he said, You know, Elvis. What? You gave me a robe tonight. Elvis smiled. Yeah. Ali pointed toward him. So don't complain when I give you something back. Elvis laughed. What are you giving me? Ali smiled. Something worth more than a robe. What? Ali's expression became serious. Permission to stop being perfect. Elvis's smile slowly disappeared. He stared at Ali. And for several seconds, there was nothing but silence. Because somehow, those 5 words were heavier than everything else Ali had said that night. Permission to stop being perfect. Then Ali walked away. Elvis remained standing in the hallway. And as the door closed behind Muhammad Ali, Elvis looked down at the floor. The king of rock and roll was surrounded by people. Surrounded by success. Surrounded by applause. But at that exact moment, he had never felt more alone. And he had never felt more understood. What happened the next time Elvis saw that robe would reveal just how much the conversation had changed him. The hallway slowly emptied after Muhammad Ali walked away. Elvis remained where he was. For several seconds, he didn't move. He could still hear Ali's final words in his head. Permission to stop being perfect. Elvis looked toward the closed door. Then he smiled faintly. Stop being perfect. He repeated the words under his breath. For a man who had spent years trying to satisfy everyone around him, the idea sounded almost impossible. The king was expected to be perfect. Perfect voice. Perfect appearance. Perfect performance. Perfect smile. Perfect confidence. Even on nights when he didn't feel any of those things. But Ali had reminded him of something Elvis had almost forgotten. He was allowed to be human. The next morning, Las Vegas looked completely different. The excitement of the previous night had disappeared. The streets were quieter. The bright signs were still glowing, but the crowds were thinner. Elvis sat alone for a few minutes, drinking coffee. On the table beside him was a newspaper. The headline was about Muhammad Ali's victory. Elvis picked it up. There was a photograph of Ali. And there it was. The robe. Elvis stared at the picture. Then he laughed. Look at him. Ali looked ridiculous. And somehow magnificent. The robe was far too extravagant for a boxing match. But Ali wore it like it had been made for him. Elvis folded the newspaper. Then something unexpected happened. He started thinking about his own performance from the previous night. He remembered the audience, the applause, the screaming. But he also remembered the moment when the music became quiet. That was the moment he had felt most comfortable. Not when everyone was screaming. When everyone was listening. Maybe Ali was right. Maybe the king didn't always have to roar. Sometimes the king could simply speak. Quick question. Let me ask you. If Muhammad Ali gave Elvis Presley one piece of advice about life, what do you think it would be? Write your answer in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Now let's return to Elvis. Because something happened later that day that made him think about Ali's words all over again. That afternoon, Elvis was scheduled to rehearse. The musicians were ready. The room was filled with instruments. Everyone expected Elvis to walk in and immediately take control. But when he entered, he didn't start singing. He simply stood there. Let's try something different. The musicians looked at each other. Elvis picked up the microphone. No big entrance. He paused. No jokes. Another pause. Just the song. The band began. Elvis started singing. And something changed. There were no fireworks. No dramatic movements. No attempt to impress anyone. Just his voice. The musicians listened carefully. When the song ended, the room was quiet. One of them finally said, "That was different." Elvis smiled. "Yeah." He looked down at the microphone. "I think I like different." That evening, Elvis received a message. Ali wanted to see him again. Elvis smiled immediately. "Tell him to come over." A short time later, Ali arrived. This time, there was no elaborate meeting. No photographers. No crowd. Just Elvis and Ali. Ali walked in and looked at Elvis. "You look different." Elvis laughed. "Different how?" "Less king." Elvis smiled. "Maybe that's your fault." Ali laughed. "Then I did my job." They sat down. Elvis told him about the rehearsal. Ali listened. Then he smiled. "So you finally took my advice." Maybe. Elvis nodded. "I tried being imperfect." Ali laughed. "How'd that feel?" "Terrifying." Ali nodded. "Good." Elvis looked at him. "Good. Yeah, means you're alive." For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Elvis laughed. "You know, you're pretty wise for a boxer." Ali immediately answered. "And you're pretty funny for a singer." They both laughed. But underneath the jokes, Elvis had one serious question. "Ali." "Yes." "Do you ever worry about what happens when people stop cheering?" Ali became quiet. He looked down. Then back at Elvis. "Everybody thinks the applause is the reward." He paused. "It ain't." "What is?" "Knowing who you are when the applause stops." Elvis looked at him. That answer hit harder than he expected. Because Elvis knew the applause would not last forever. Nobody's did. Every star eventually watched the lights go out. Every champion eventually stepped away from the ring. Every voice eventually became quieter. And maybe the real question wasn't how long the world would remember them. Maybe the real question was whether they could still recognize themselves after the world stopped shouting their names. One more question for you. Imagine you're sitting at that table with Elvis and Ali. You have one question to ask them. What would it be? Write it in the comments. And if this story is keeping you hooked, hit like subscribe and tell us what country or city you're watching from Because the final moment of this story brings everything back to that strange sentence Ali gave Elvis. Permission to stop being perfect. Before Ali left, Elvis walked him to the door. Ali turned around. "You know something." "What?" "You gave me that robe." Elvis smiled. "Yeah." Ali pointed at him. And I gave you something better. Elvis laughed. You really believe that? Ali nodded. I know that. What did you give me? Ali smiled. A reminder. Of what? That even kings need somebody who'll tell them the truth. Elvis stared at him. Then he smiled. Thanks, Ali. Ali nodded. Anytime. He walked away. Elvis watched him disappear down the hallway. Then he looked toward the empty room. For years, people had called him the King ***. But that night, for the first time in a long time, Elvis wasn't thinking about being a king. He was thinking about being Elvis. Just Elvis. And perhaps that was the greatest gift Muhammad Ali had given him. Not a compliment. Not a prediction. Not a famous quote. Just a reminder that behind the crown, there was still a man. And that man didn't have to be perfect. He only had to be real. The days passed, but Elvis couldn't forget Muhammad Ali's words. Permission to stop being perfect. They stayed with him. Every time he stepped onto a stage, he remembered them. Every time thousands of people screamed his name, he remembered the quiet conversation in that Las Vegas room. And slowly, Elvis began to understand what Ali had meant. The world didn't need another perfect Elvis Presley. It needed the real one. One evening, before another performance, Elvis stood alone backstage. The audience was already waiting. He could hear them through the curtains. Thousands of voices. Elvis. For years, that sound had been everything. But that night, Elvis didn't immediately walk onto the stage. He closed his eyes and remembered Ali. Who are you when nobody is watching? Elvis took a deep breath. Then he smiled. I'm still Elvis. The curtain opened. He walked onto the stage. The crowd exploded. But this time, Elvis didn't try to become the legend they expected. He simply sang. And somehow, it became one of the most genuine performances of his life. Quick question. Before we finish, I want to ask you, do you think Muhammad Ali truly understood what Elvis was going through? Write yes or no in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Because the final moment of this story is the reason their meeting is still remembered. Later that night, Elvis returned backstage. On a nearby table was a photograph of Muhammad Ali wearing the robe Elvis had given him. Elvis picked it up. He smiled. Then he quietly said, "Good luck, champ." He placed the photograph back down. For Elvis, the robe had started as a gift. For Ali, it had become something he carried into battle. But their friendship had created something much more valuable. Respect. Two men from completely different worlds had recognized the same struggle. Ali fought opponents in a ring. Elvis fought expectations on a stage. And both men discovered that sometimes the hardest opponent wasn't standing in front of you. It was the person the world expected you to become. Years later, people would remember the photographs. They would remember Elvis's white outfit. They would remember Ali's famous smile. They would remember the incredible meeting between the king of rock and roll and the greatest boxer of all time. But perhaps the most important moment wasn't captured by a camera. It was a quiet conversation between two men. No audience. No microphones. No applause. Just Elvis and Ali. And one simple message. You don't have to be perfect to be great. Maybe that's why the meeting mattered. Because Elvis didn't need Muhammad Ali to tell him he was a king. The whole world already knew that. What Elvis needed was someone brave enough to remind him that before he was the king, he was a man. And Muhammad Ali did exactly that. Ali once walked into Elvis's world wearing the king's robe. But when he walked away that night, he left Elvis with something far more valuable. A question. Who are you when nobody is watching? And perhaps Elvis spent the rest of his life trying to answer it. Because beneath the lights, beneath the music, beneath the fame, there was still just Elvis. And for one unforgettable night in Las Vegas, Muhammad Ali saw him.